been night and day for us as far as all of the insights and data availability and reporting, and a lot of opportunity to align different teams that weren't really maybe talking with each other as much as they had been prior.
I'm a new user for the last 6 months, and I use it very quick to do a report and identify, uh, you know, bills with taxes, and we're a tax exempt organization. So up to now, we have been refunded 1.3 million.
Now that it's in EnergyCAP, we can drill down and find, like, well, what are our top variances and what was happening in those buildings, and we just could not do this until we got an EnergyCAP.
There's nothing else that I'm aware of that really does everything in one place in the way that EnergyCAP does.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cassie with EMA, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. I also want to thank our sponsor, EnergyCAP, for supporting this session today. Just a few items to cover before we get started. Our presenters will hold questions until the end of the presentation, but we invite you to submit them at any time using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you happen to experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat function to inform the panelists so that our producer, Will, can assist you. This presentation is being recorded, and it will be available for viewing in 1 week. In terms of continuing education credit, everyone in attendance for the full webinar today will receive a certificate of attendance sent to their email. And finally, if you're a certified EMP, your CEUs for attending this webinar will be automatically uploaded to your respective portal after the webinar. Our webinar today is Facility Comfort versus Financial Control, Bridging the Gap Before Utility Budgets Break. I'd like to welcome our speakers for today, Steve Heinz and Thomas Diliberti. Steve Heinz is the founder and former longtime CEO of EnergyCAP. He has 50 years of professional experience in energy management software, mechanical and architectural engineering, and business entrepreneurship. Steve received his Master of Science degree in architectural engineering from Pennsylvania State University and his Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering from the U.S. Air Force Academy. He is a registered professional engineer in Pennsylvania and an Association of Energy Engineers Fellow, CEM, and CMVP. Steve was the 2013 AEE International Energy Engineer of the Year Award recipient. He has authored many articles on the topics of sustainability and energy and water management and has presented training seminars on those topics to thousands. A guiding motivation for his lifelong focus on sustainability is Jonas Salk's memorable quote, "Our greatest responsibility is to be good ancestors." Tom Diliberti is the Energy and Sustainability Manager at EnergyCAP. He is an energy and sustainability expert with a background in facilities technology and operational efficiency. A former energy manager himself, he applies his analytical and educational skills to help organizations optimize energy use, improve sustainability, and maximize ROI. With experience in energy management software solutions, Tom specializes in turning complex data into actionable insights and training energy professionals. He holds CEM, CMVP, CIAQP, and CLEP certifications from the Association of Energy Engineers. And without further ado, I will hand it over to Steve and Tom to kick us off today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cassie. And welcome in, everybody, today. We're excited to be here with you and spend the next hour alongside of you. Today's agenda is we want to talk about efficiency and the fact that it's not a team game. So as part of our agenda, we want to kick off with understanding the roles and responsibilities of different departments within our organizations. I want to spend a few minutes talking about forecasted utility rates, but a bulk of the presentation is going to be this middle part of the agenda here. It's a low-cost recommendations for the Finance and Facilities Department. Steve and I are hoping to give you a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, ways to go back to your organizations and try to seek savings and improve your efficiency without spending a lot of money. And we'll conclude our presentation today by finding ways or offering some ways for you to share your success. So with that as a kickoff, let's slide into our first poll question. When we do these webinars, we always like to know who we're talking to, the amount of experience that people have as they join our webinars. So if you could please take a minute or so. And the question is what is your experience in working with energy management? Cassie just shared with you that Steve and I spent a lot of years of our lives working with energy management. So we've got a lot of enthusiasm and excitement. and just wondering where you're at in your journey with energy management. Okay, so it looks like we've got a lot of responses, and looks like there's a smattering across the board, as you might expect. Some people just starting out, others who've spent a few years, but a bulk of the people on the call looks like they've spent a number of years, more than a decade, in the energy management field. So that's exciting for all of you, and again, we're all happy that that you're here for today's webinar. I had mentioned a minute ago the amount of time that Steve and I have spent in the industry just trying to help others save energy and ultimately save money. And one of the things I have to temper my enthusiasm with as I speak is sometimes I get so excited to share some of these ideas, I tend to forget that organizations have to stay focused on their main thing. So you're probably familiar with this quote that came out from Stephen Covey about 30 years ago now, but his quote is, "Keep the main thing the main thing." And I like to start these webinars by talking about that, because we recognize that whether it's education that you're in the business of healthcare, you're an industrial organization, you have to keep the main thing the main thing. But what I'd also challenge you with is energy conservation and energy efficiency can be done simultaneous with those things. It's a matter of planning and organizing and putting together some strategies. And that's what we want to talk about today. So what I want to jump into now, and Steve and I are going to ping pong back and forth a little bit here, is I want to highlight the different groups within an organization. We get so busy in our daily lives, we tend to focus on our own priorities and we dismiss what others are doing. And I think for an organization to be as efficient as possible, you need to come together and need to understand what other people are juggling and look beyond your own responsibilities. So let me start by highlighting the facilities and the operations department. Again, nothing on this list is probably going to shock you, but it's more to move it to the front of your brain, to just think about each of these people working in these areas, what they're doing day to day and the pressures that they feel. Because if we're going to make change, if we're going to change the culture, we're going to get more efficient, we need to come together. And like I say, we need to understand better what each of us is juggling. So facilities and operations, they're developing and implementing long-range plans. They're trying to renovate our buildings and look at new construction projects. They're managing the facility budget, including capital expenditures and operational costs. They're overseeing maintenance programs and preventive maintenance programs. They want to manage space utilization and try to make sure that the workflow is efficient. They're directing and supervising maintenance staff and operations staff around the buildings. They're implementing and maintaining safety and security procedures. These are just routine day after day. Additionally, they're conducting regular inspections to identify and address the hazards and the risks around our buildings. They're training, they're hiring, they're evaluating the performance of individuals working at our buildings. They're communicating with staff, clients, vendors, always in constant communication to try to make sure that the buildings are running smoothly and people are getting what they want. They're maintaining accurate records of the activities, inspections. And the focus is, for this team of people, is to keep the buildings comfortable and safe and clean. So all three of those are just huge priorities. And all of the countless conversations I've had with facility directors through the years, I know this is the primary focus. It's about keeping things comfortable and safe and clean in the buildings. And again, what I want to challenge you with is this idea is that absolutely that's got to be the number one priority, but you also have to keep in mind the idea of efficiency. And you're going to see in a second when I talk about forecast utility rates, it's becoming more and more important to keep efficiency in mind, because of the cost of not doing so is going to be significant. So let me hand it off to Steve here, and he's going to take us through the finance department's responsibilities.
Yes, thanks, Tom. The finance department is the second member of the team that will be hopefully is coming together to improve the efficiency and to save energy and money. I must say it was a big revelation to me in my first energy manager position to understand the importance of the finance department. I would have thought most important are the facilities technicians and the people in operations, and they certainly are important. But when I started to review utility bills that were being processed and paid by the finance department, I found all kinds of problems, all kinds of low hanging fruit that could be harvested to save money. So the important things that finance are doing, the most important things relative to energy management, are they're receiving and they're processing utility bills, and they're also establishing the budgets. And of course, controlling all the funds for retrofits and that kind of thing. So the finance department is really a key player in the overall energy management team. And it's really important for the energy manager and the facilities department to have a good relationship with the finance department. You need to work together. Tom?
Absolutely. Another part of the team that we need to always include, and many times this is part of the team that's in the tip of the spear that's leading the charge, is our ESG professionals, our sustainability folks. So they're out there trying to understand and applying for these ESG frameworks and standards. And we probably all understand it's dynamic, it's constantly changing. So it's a lot of reading, a lot of follow-up, a lot of attending conferences and understanding what's going on. But it's collecting, it's analyzing, it's interpreting all of this data, because the primary responsibility of these individuals is to keep the organization on the right path. And jumping out of the last one, it's adhering to ethical and legal considerations. It's important an organization doesn't step on a rake or doesn't have an event that causes and wreaks havoc on the organization. So they've got to engage stakeholders. They're constantly communicating. They're producing reports, and they're identifying strategies and policies and targets, and working internally and externally, communicating with the broader community and making sure that all of the successes that an organization has are communicated and people are aware of that, for the publicity and all the benefits of that. And the last group, which Steve is going to tackle, is the energy manager.
Yes, the energy manager is the, you might say, the coach of the whole team, because the energy manager is going to control the priorities of energy management activities. The energy manager is going to push and promote certain things, responsible for communicating the success throughout the organization, which is very important to get everyone in the organization on board. The most important things from my experience that the energy manager is doing is monitoring and analyzing utility data, working with facilities to optimize building operations, prioritizing retrofits, deciding which ones make the most sense for any particular building or any particular organization. Identifying strategies. We want to reduce costs, we want to reduce energy consumption, we want to reduce water consumption, but as Tom was saying, we don't want to impact comfort. So that's a major piece of it. I would also say, I know probably a lot of you in the audience are involved with building commissioning. That's a topic that's sort of near and dear to my heart. We built a new EnergyCAP headquarters building. Well, we started right before COVID, and then we got stuck when COVID first hit and construction shut down for a number of weeks, and it started up again. We got the building done. But as a result of that, the building just was not commissioned properly. And to this day, we still have building commissioning problems. And then the other factor is with remote work, suddenly we don't have as many people in the building as the building was designed for. And that kind of messes up the commissioning of the HVAC systems, because there's often excess outside air being brought in and things like that. So the energy manager's role in working with facilities for building commissioning is also another important responsibility. Tom?
Yeah, and so what hopefully Steve and I have been able to highlight over the last few minutes is just all these people in the organization are working hard to achieve different things and overlapping things. And what we need to understand is each other's roles and how, if we come together, we can really take organization to the next level. So the main theme there is it's about teamwork, understanding, and working together. What I want to jump into next is just give you a flavor for projected rate increases for utilities in the coming years. And there's a lot on this slide. I just want to give you a chance to kind of look it over and read a little bit, but hopefully it's obvious with the different colors around the country. You see the South and the West, the Midwest and such. And if you skim read here, you notice there's a lot of things going on. In the South, there's population growth and climate impact. In the Northeast, there's massive demand and high baseline prices. Midwest, aging infrastructure. Out West, you got climate change taking place, and a lot more details here that we've included in the graphic. But the main thing the main theme here is that rates are increasing all over the country. Now, it's different reasons. There's different things happening around the country driving the rate increases. But if you notice, all these numbers are 2-digit numbers and they're big. And I wanted to make sure, Steve and I wanted to make sure that you knew this is coming in the next 5 years. And so now is the time to plan. Now is the time to maybe set yourself on a course or on a path to try to offset some of these anticipated costs with operating things in different ways. And so a bulk of the presentation for the next 15, 20 minutes or so is we want to give you some ideas of how the finance department can work together with the other teams internally, and also the facilities department, how they can work together or do some things in the building to try to save some energy and ultimately save some money as a way to offset these incoming costs. So I want to hand it back to Steve, and Steve's going to carry the ball here for a little while, talking about some of these ideas. I'll jump in later, but Steve, if you can pick up here and teach us about how the finance department can help us save some energy, please.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. First, let's talk about these different team members and what links them together, because I think that's an important point. Out of the box, the finance department is not thinking about energy management. They might be thinking about cost reduction, but not energy management. So things that link them together, I would say the first bullet summarizes all below. Energy information, i.e. data. That is what brings these four groups together. That data consists of utility bill data, smart meter data, i.e. 15-minute interval data, facility operations schedules. It's important that the occupancy of buildings are synchronized with HVAC systems. Occupancy volume, in other words, number of people, because that drives how much outdoor air, ventilation, and so on you need in the facility. And as I mentioned earlier, with remote work, a lot of buildings are really being over-ventilated, which gets to be a problem in a winter climate where you're bringing in excessive amounts of 0-degree outside air, where you don't need that much fresh air because you don't have that many people in the building. Utility rate schedules is another source of kind of data that these departments share. And then there's external benchmarks like Energy Star. So what is needed to share all this energy information? What I was talking about was the kinds of energy information that links the departments together. Well, how are they sharing it? So everyone has a single source of truth. What we need is a data platform, a platform that has the financial grade data. It can perform analysis. It can produce reports. It has dashboards. It has benchmarks, so that everything that those four different groups are using is coming from the same source. And something else that's emerging technology, of course, is AI. You can't get away from that. Everyone's talking about AI. And I'm sure that in the near future, and I can't say how near that future is, but sometime before too long, AI is going to be playing a bigger and bigger role in operating buildings and optimizing the energy use in the building. In order for AI to be effective, it needs to be trained. Training requires data. So there we are. We're back at data. Financial grade data is a key to all of this. So speaking about Energy Information Platform, this webinar is sponsored by EnergyCAP. So a few things about EnergyCAP. I founded EnergyCAP in 1980, 45 years ago. The mission was use this emerging PC technology. This was before they even called PCs. I was an energy manager at the time, so I saw a need for a software tool that the energy manager could use to collect this data, put it in one platform, and then use it to power a lot of value streams. Over the years, EnergyCAP has added a lot of new functionality. Some major developments included M&V, measurement and verification of savings. We've had this since 1985, a decade before some other groups and the predecessor of IPMVP came out. So we were doing this for a long time. We created a link between energy information and accounts payable so that utility bills wouldn't have to be keyed twice. You could key it once into EnergyCAP, verify it, move it to accounts payable. That was over 30 years ago that we pioneered that. We created a utility bill processing service, the ability to ingest smart meter data, which really expands the value streams that flow out of EnergyCAP. And then we added carbon reporting when that became something of interest and concern to a lot of customers, and Energy Star interface, and have added all sorts of improvements along the way, SOC and FedRAMP compliance, things like that, to bolster the security of the system. And who uses EnergyCAP today? Well, the major market segments are education, government, and commercial. Education is K-12 schools. There are about 45 million students who go to public schools every day. There's about 100,000 public school buildings in the US, so that's a huge sector. And that doesn't even include universities and tech schools and things like that. Government, municipal government, state government, federal government, the same issues. They have a lot of facilities. They need the data. They have a lot of people that need to share the data. Another is commercial. Now there's numbers of commercial sectors. Healthcare, hospital chains are a big one. Retail chains, utility companies. It's surprising. You would think a utility company would know everything about the energy used in their own buildings, yet they don't. And utility companies need an external platform to track their own energy in their own buildings because it's a specialized functionality. Telecom, you see cell towers everywhere. Everywhere you see a cell tower or antennas, there's a utility meter connected to that. The real estate space, commercial office buildings, multifamily, and so on is a huge sector. And ESCOs, as energy service companies aren't tracking their own buildings, they're tracking their customer buildings and providing services for them. And probably numbers of you are involved in that space, and they find the EnergyCAP platform to be very helpful in a third-party platform that they can share with their customers, share the successes and the savings and so on. Okay, now let me talk about the finance department, important things that the finance department can do in cooperation with the energy manager to drive down energy, water consumption, and cost. The first thing is pretty simple, but it's amazing to this day. I've been looking at this now for 45, 50 years. Errors on utility bills. You'd think from the 1970s saying, oh, in the mid-2020s, utility bills, man, they're going to be correct. They're going to be standardized. Well, neither of the above has happened. There's still lots of problems with utility bills. Duplicate bills, faulty meter readings, all kinds of things. So you can see the kinds of things that we typically automatically check on a utility bill to spot problems. Tom?
Whoops. There we go.
Utility account ownership. This is one that there's some good stories that we could tell about this. You would think that an organization would be paying the utility bills for their buildings, their accounts, and only their accounts. But we have found some huge errors over the years where an organization was paying for somebody else's utility bill. So how does that happen? Typically, it's because an organization sells a building, but in the process, the utility account doesn't get changed over to the new owner, and just nobody notices it. Well, maybe the new owner notices it, but the seller doesn't notice it, and sometimes years later, they are still paying those utility bills. So that's some low-hanging fruit that you can verify relatively easily. Next. Meter multipliers. I've seen this many times over the years where a meter fails, or maybe a new building is constructed and a meter is put on it, multiple meters, and the meter multiplier, or maybe the size of the service, is not correctly entered into the utility company's billing system. And so those calculations are off right from day one. How do you spot that? Typically, you spot that by benchmarking buildings, comparing like buildings on a use cost per square foot basis. And it often is very obvious where one is sky high compared to another for no apparent reason. Utility rate schedules it's important to understand the rate schedules because you can develop operational strategies around a rate schedule, and you also might find that you're not on the best rate schedule. So it's very important for the energy manager to work with the finance department for particularly the larger accounts to be sure that everyone understands the finer details of how the utility rate and cost every month is calculated. We found over the years lots of problems where tax-exempt organizations are paying sales tax and maybe some other local fees when they should be exempt from it. Now, you would think that would be pretty simple when a university that doesn't have to pay local or state sales tax builds a new building. You would think that the utility company wouldn't add sales tax to it. But so often there's just a disconnect between the construction of a building and clerical department in the utility company. They don't quite get the word right, and they might just click a checkbox that says add state sales tax. And then we find years later, when we review the accounts, that sales tax is being paid, has been paid perhaps for years and shouldn't have been paid. And understanding electrical invoices and exactly how the rate schedule works with the operation of the building is really important. Understanding the different tariffs or rate schedules that a building can be on, understanding on-peak, off-peak, time of use, actual versus estimated invoices. We've got some good stories about that, where a utility account was estimated, in one case was estimated for years because the meter reader couldn't get into the building, could no longer get into the building to read the meter. So they just kept estimating it based upon what the building had been using. The reason why the meter reader couldn't get into the mechanical room is because the building had been cleared out and it was vacant. But they were still sending an estimated bill for based upon prior occupied months. And that went on, this was for a city government, for years before it was spotted. Tom? And there's some aspects to utility bills that you might not expect the finance department to really understand. Two of those are power factor and load factor. Power factor is basically an indicator of the loads in the building, if they're more resistive loads or inductive loads. Inductive loads meaning a lot of electrical motors. If there's a lot of inductive loads, it basically has an impact on the power quality that the utility company and the power amount that the utility company has to deliver. So there is what you might call a penalty for a low power factor. That's something that can be addressed and can be corrected. But first of all, you have to understand when you're paying some excess dollars because of a poor power factor. A totally different concept is load factor. Load factor is an indicator of how steady and constant the electrical use in a building is. A good example of very high load factor would be a data center. It's using the same amount of electricity pretty much 24/7. Utility companies like that. So they typically offer a lower rate. Now, when does this become a savings opportunity? I've seen this happen quite a few times, where a building's usage is changed over time. Maybe originally it was an office building that had a typical load factor of 50%, 60%. And then a data center was built in that building that had a very high load factor, but no one thought to check the rate schedule to say, can we now move to a cheaper high load factor rate? So it's important to understand how these things work. A real simple way that you can spot some outliers is to group your utility accounts by vendor and rate code. You would expect that if you have 50 buildings that are all on the same vendor and rate, let's say you have 50 elementary schools, and they're all served by the same vendor, they're on the same rate schedule. You would expect the average unit cost to be very similar building to building to building. So it can be very powerful to simply rank your accounts looking at maybe 12 months worth of average unit cost. And if you see any outliers, that's probably an indication of something that you ought to drill into deeper. There's probably some cost reduction opportunity there. And the same thing with ranking accounts by annual cost or annual consumption. This is something that I would do as one of the very first steps. Identify what your major cost drivers are for the organization. What are the big accounts? You want to pay the most attention to the biggies, at least to start out, and save your time for the smaller accounts later when time permits. By understanding your rate schedules and your average unit cost and so on, you can identify which accounts might potentially be candidates for alternative rates. Most utility companies have more than one rate option. Now, that can get pretty complicated and sometimes requires some specialized expertise by a consultant. Sometimes you can just talk to the utility company and ask them if there is an alternate rate that would be better given your history of consumption. Also, in deregulated states, energy supply options can potentially be a big source of cost reduction.
Yeah, Steve, I think this is where I kind of plan to take over.
Yes.
So we're doing kind of in a webinar today is we're transitioning at this point from the stuff that Steve has highlighted in the last 15 minutes is a lot of stuff that can be done in an office by the finance department. Certainly, it requires a little bit of understanding, some training, and very likely a tool, a way to see all this data in a nice, clean way. But by putting effort into understanding the bills, how you're paying for certain utility, and just are there different options, different mistakes that are being made, catching those and following up on those. Many times there's great opportunity to save doing that work. What I want to highlight for the next 10 minutes or so is what we can do out in the field. What can the facilities department do along with the energy manager and the other parts of the team to generate savings? So how can we operate the buildings a little bit different? And I want to start with this core management philosophy. And I have to give Steve credit for this because he dubbed this. And I just think it's a great, simple way of looking at how to approach managing facilities. So the idea is, if you have HVAC, you have lighting, you have systems, IT systems, whatever they might be, if it's possible to turn them off when they're not in use, that would be step number one. Turn it off. There's no better way to save energy than to power things down that can be done safely and reasonably as long as they power up the following day. Why not? Just power things off, turn things off. If you can't power things off because of limitations or occupancy or a bevy of other factors, the next option would be to set it back. So see if you can't change the temperature, or think about lights, maybe setting back lights, and maybe you've never thought about it this way, but maybe they can be dimmed. Maybe the lights can't be turned off all the way. But many of us have begun to see parking lots at night that dim, right? Where it goes from a full brightness when it detects people and traffic and cars moving around, but then when there's no movement, the lights dim. To me, that's the concept here, to set it back, change the temperatures, change the loads, decrease the amount of energy that's being used. So if you can't turn it off and you can't set it back, if you're forced to let it run, then tune it up. So if you've got systems, and this might be true again of all sorts of different things, IT systems and lighting systems and HVAC systems, if they're forced to run all the time, 24/7, then put some effort into tuning them up. Make sure that they're running as efficiently as possible. And also, if you've identified systems that are not running efficiently, maybe those are the first slated for replacement. So sort out your data, find those systems and prioritize them, and it's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. So again, to summarize, turn it off if you can, set it back if you can't, and if you got to run it, tune it up. If you live with that philosophy as an energy manager and you're out in the field, you're going to make great headway in managing your facilities. Another thing, and Steve has alluded to this from the perspective of the finance department, but the same thing holds true from the facilities department and the energy manager, is you got to benchmark your buildings. You got to take a look at how they're performing and group them together. Take a look at buildings that maybe are of similar age. Maybe you throw them in a bucket and you compare them. Or maybe it's similar mechanical systems, all buildings that are chiller buildings or buildings that are rooftop buildings or have similar attributes to them. That's how you can identify the energy hogs or the buildings that seem to jump out that require more attention. It's rather obvious, but it bears saying is that use energy use index is a great tool for looking at your buildings that are using the most energy. And don't forget about Energy Star. If you haven't gotten a recent update on the Energy Star program, it's still alive and well, appears to be funded for another year. So Energy Star Portfolio Manager, again, appears to be healthy and alive for at least the next year and hopefully long beyond that. But Energy Star is a great way of looking at your buildings. Look at the CPEX data to see how you're doing against median performance of buildings, but you got to find the ones that are underperforming and spend some effort getting out in the field and identifying what's causing some of those problems. I want to spend a few slides, so maybe 5 minutes or so, talking about this 15-minute smart meter data, or interval data is another term. And in some cases, people see this data the next day. So if you're not familiar with this data for many utility companies around the country, and I'm speaking specifically of electrical utility companies, they have this data more readily available now than they did 10 years ago or certainly 20 years ago. So it is available and it's out there, but you've got to get access to the data, but it's very powerful data. What I want to do is just talk you through, just for those in the call that maybe haven't seen this data before, this chart down here in the bottom right-hand corner is a plot of this 15-minute interval data. The black line represents the energy use every 15 minutes, so it plots across the graph moving from left to right. The green region represents an area or a anticipated usage based on the history. So when the black line is within the green, that's what's expected. When the black line leaves the green, it means that you're outside of normal. And the blue vertical region here that I'm trying to highlight is an overlay that you can put in these graphs in order to understand maybe the times when you'd be penalized for energy use. So this might be an on-peak window. So this type of data is very powerful, looking at how the usage pattern goes, what's normal, what's expensive, and allows you to study your buildings and really focus on where there might be opportunities. So the list here, some of the things that you might be able to identify is, suppose you're starting your buildings a little bit too early in the morning. This data can highlight that, or that can pop out of the data. Maybe the building recovers in a half hour, and it's turning on 2 hours ahead of time. And I've seen this a lot for those of you that might be using optimal start or some type of automated way of determining how a building is going to fire up in the morning and start itself. Keep an eye on it. Those are very good systems, but they need to be monitored to make sure that they're working correctly, because if some sensors malfunction or misread, they can cause the buildings to run in patterns that you just wouldn't expect. So whether it's morning startup or it's evening setback, make sure you're using this data to confirm that the buildings are running the way they're supposed to. They also can expose those situations where if you're trying to shut buildings down or set things back on weekends or holidays, if your organization has the ability to do those things, make sure that they're genuinely happening out there. Don't assume they're happening. And this data is great. I tell people this is a great way to virtually audit your buildings. You can see what's happened in the buildings without physically being on site. I want to encourage you to also be on site to make sure you're walking the buildings at different times, looking for things, and I'm going to talk about that here in a minute, but take advantage of the technology and audit things virtually as well. You might have equipment that's frequently turning on and off. It's cycling, it's short cycling, which we all know is not good for the equipment. This data is excellent at finding those. You'll see the data spike up and down, and it will be a red flag and say, hey, we gotta take a look at that motor, take a look at that system that's running a little out of whack. If you've got a big piece of equipment that's driving a lot of your demand because it's just so big, this allows you to track that piece of equipment and make sure you manage it during those periods of peak demand. And maybe you got to find another solution. Maybe it's using some type of strategy of battery storage or some type of demand response program, something to take advantage of getting that piece of equipment turned off or managing it in ways that has a financial benefit to you. Also, like the large HVAC units you might want to turn on, I would encourage you, if you don't use this as a control strategy, to stage large equipment on in the morning. So big motors that are turning on, big air handling units, don't turn them all on at the same time. Usually the best way to operate them is to stage them on, and this data is excellent at tracking that and seeing how the loads change in the building as equipment ramps up first thing in the morning. You can identify stuff that's running overnight, which is great. And a thing that many times gets forgotten about is this last bullet, is this data is great at determining the cost of retrofit. So you do a retrofit, whether it be lighting or something mechanical, you can use this data post retrofit to see how the building performed pre and post and net out the difference. And I have an example of that here in a second, which you can see how you can get some numbers from it. So use this data to validate actions that are taking place in the buildings, and also it's great for calculating cost avoidance. So let me go through a couple examples here. So this is similar to the previous interval data graph that I had a second ago, but this is a 7-day graph. So I want you to notice the dates here. So this is around the holidays, around the Christmas holiday. And what you're seeing here, once again, is the usage in black, which suggests that it was running as normal because it was in the green region for a couple days. And then all of a sudden the black flattens out when the green is still showing the same pattern. And what can be learned through this is the building was set back during the holiday period of time. Normally, a Monday through Friday or the weekend, it was running, and now the black line suggests it's no longer doing that. So it's confirming, it's verifying a setback. So if you take action to save energy and ultimately save money, you're able to prove that is in fact happening. And this is great at convincing people. If they're uncertain whether to spend money for certain efforts, having data like this post-event, post-energy conservation measure is very, very powerful because it shows people that, in fact, you were successful in your efforts. This here is another example of the interval data, just charted a little bit different. So rather than using the other type of plot, this is a bar plot. And just giving you a second to digest this, what you see here is you see 5 different humps in the data. Those represent the 5 different work days of the week. In the missing humps here in the middle would represent the weekend. So you've got a 7-day week. It's just staggered Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the weekend days, and then Monday, Tuesday. But what's really neat about this data and the analytics that can be done is this can roll up how much energy you're using, whether you're on schedule or whether you're off schedule. So when you look at this total here, and I'll approximate it as 10,000 units, this is saying that every time you go occupied and you have 5 humps in the data, 5 into 10,000 or 10,000 divided by 5, each one of these humps represents about 2,000 units of use. So you can quantify, you can turn that into the impact of turning a building from the unoccupied to the occupied mode. So then you multiply by the rate, the utility rate. And I didn't go through that long calculation here because I think my intent here is conceptual, that you can see this data and turn it into something meaningful because you have something to draw on. And this off-schedule number here, this roughly 11,000 number, to me, you've got 7 days through the week. This is essentially telling you your base load. This is telling you if you were to divide this number by 7, and it turns out roughly mathematically to about 1,500, it's saying you are going to be spending 1,500 units a day as a base load, regardless of whether you go occupied or not. Again, very powerful information if you want to begin to quantify things and calculate some values. One last example here is just verifying a leak. So this example, again, similar to the other graphs, your green line here is showing that you have no use on a water meter. Water meter was used again, and all of a sudden you start to see the water meter never returns back to 0. So over the course of time, this data exposed that a leak occurred. And if you wanted to quantify the impact of that leak, you could turn that into dollars and cents with the right calculation. So the point here is this data is very, very powerful. If you don't have access to it, you might begin to learn more about it and explore this. But I'd also say go to your utility companies if you haven't begun to use electrical interval data, because most utility companies around the country have access to that data. I mentioned a minute ago about virtually auditing your buildings and using the powerful tools. I don't want to discourage you from literally walking your buildings and getting out during occupied time and unoccupied time. There is no more powerful experience for an energy manager and facility people than to see their buildings in action and understand what's happening. It's connecting the data. Back to the whole theme of this webinar today, it's about the data. You got to connect the data with your experiences in the building, because even to this day, even with all the sophisticated equipment, you still got to check the thermostat set points and make sure that the temperatures in the room are similar to the set points. And another thing that happens is people usually have push buttons or slide bars. They can do things to the thermostat. They can fool the thermostat in order to get temperature preferences. You need to understand that so you can put strategies around managing it. If there's unnecessary lighting, got to find it and hopefully come up with ways to turn off lighting. Look for the greatest opportunities of lighting replacement. So if you have those lights on, remember I mentioned a minute ago, if you can't turn it off, set it back. And if you can't set it back, then tune it up. Well, maybe this is a situation where you're unable to get these lights turned off. There's just no way to manage it. So these become the ones, well, let's take a look at doing a lighting replacement, because it's going to reap some significant benefit for doing so. The other thing is with heating and cooling, there's evidence in the space if people are hot or cold. They'll wear jackets, they'll open windows. You don't know that unless you're in the building seeing that information. And another common thing is exhaust fans. People tend to dismiss exhaust fans and think they're really not that big of an energy user. But if there are many of them and they're moving a lot of air, it's the air that they're allowing to be pulled into the building that may need to be heated or cooled. That's your big expense. So don't dismiss exhaust fans. Every exhaust fan in every building should have a management strategy built around it to make sure that it's functioning correctly. Let me hand it back to Steve to begin to wrap us up here. Steve, back to you.
And when you find success in these various things we've been talking about, a really crucial step is to communicate that success. Because if you don't communicate it throughout the organization, you're not going to get quote credit for it or goodwill. And it's not that you're just trying to be boastful. You're trying to set yourself up for the next budget request. And you're more likely to get your projects approved if members of the organization who are decision makers have a good opinion of what you've been doing, because they have seen the results of your efforts. One way you can do that is with dashboards and reports. These dashboards can be put together about however you like, so that with just one click, people can quickly eyeball this and get an idea about how well things are going. Reports can be scheduled to auto distribute to a certain audience. So that's another good way to put something in someone's mailbox to communicate your success. So this, I can't overemphasize how important the communications step is in the overall success of energy management and cost reduction.
Absolutely. And hopefully what we've been able to highlight in the last 30 minutes or so is just there's lots of stuff that can be done in the office, out in the field. It's having a comprehensive strategy for approaching that. And hopefully through today's webinar, we've given you some things to think about. One of the things that we've tried to do is give you some ideas that will simultaneously helping you understand better about EnergyCAP. So if any of you on the webinar today would like to learn more about this, please respond to this poll. Just let us know. We're happy to connect with you and answer any questions that you might have. At the end of the day, when you are in this arena of trying to make change, I think there's a couple of critical principles. One is culture. I think building a culture of energy conservation and collaboration is just really, really important for organizations to start there. And the other huge thing, it's about action. It's about taking action. It's these things do not happen on their own. As I've worked with literally hundreds of organizations around the country, that's what I saw. I saw people coming together, working for a common cause, and people taking action. They found things. They actually put solutions together to solve some of the problems they have. And many problems are similar from one organization to the next, but everybody's got their unique challenges as well. So if you would like to connect with me, I am available on LinkedIn. I'd love to have you connect with me, or if you want to email me directly, here's my email address. And I think we are getting to the point where we are ready for some questions. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, Steve and I are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you both so much. We've got a couple of things coming into the Q&A. Just like Tom said, if you've got questions, we've got a few minutes, so add those in the Q&A. This person had a comment, said, I haven't seen stagnating equipment startup time to reduce peak demand. That's a neat suggestion, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then Sharon had a question that said, what do you consider to be low-hanging fruit when reviewing utility bills?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Tom, we've both seen some stuff.
Go ahead, Steve.
I mentioned account ownership, paying a utility bill that's for a building that you no longer own. Accounts where you're paying sales tax, but you're sales tax exempt. Accounts that are clearly on the wrong rate schedule, maybe because the function of the building changed over time. So the rate schedule that it was put on when the building was constructed is not the optimum rate schedule for today. Meter reading problems, duplicate billing problems. That's the kind of thing that I would consider the real low-hanging fruit. Now, how do you know where the low-hanging fruit is? One thing would be to quickly review all your utility accounts by setting up a platform like EnergyCAP, where you set up all your buildings and then you assign utility accounts to buildings. Going through that process is going to identify any utility accounts that don't have a building to belong to. That's one way that you might spot those kinds of problems. And then once you get some data built up in there, you can start to rank and benchmark. I mentioned ranking your accounts by average unit cost, by rate, by vendor. And that's quickly going to reveal which accounts are outliers. So through all this process, you're really looking for outliers, and you need a data platform to statistically identify outliers, and then you drill into those. Sometimes you can work with the utility company and they'll help you with that as well. But you can't call the utility company and say, I have 1,000 utility accounts, please look at all of them and tell me if there's any problems. They're probably not going to do that. But if you say these 10 seem to be statistical outliers by average unit cost or some other index, they often will help and look at a handful of them.
I would just add to that, one of the things that I found very powerful in working with people around the country is literally just fanning the bills out on a big table, like bills that are similar. Suppose, using the example of a school organization where maybe you've got 4 different high schools or something similar to that, where you just put them all on the table and look at all of them kind of simultaneously. You begin to see patterns or inconsistencies, and all of a sudden you get excited because you know there's things that just don't feel right and don't look right. And maybe that's my final thought for this is usually when you're looking at the bills, if it just doesn't feel right, don't let it go. I mean, keep dogging that issue, because chances are there's going to be some type of benefit. You just get a feel for these things over time, and that's I think words to live by when it comes to utility bills. Cassie, what else?
Well, following up on that, Jared asked if you've got any negotiation tips for working with utility companies.
You know what? That's a great question. I don't know if there's, I'll offer this. I'll say that most utility companies, I think people have the perception that they are not there to support you. And I would challenge that. I think most utility companies are very interested in trying to serve you as a client. They might need a little bit of prodding, like you might need to invite them to your office. You might need to try to establish a relationship with them. but normally their motivations are pure and they do want to help you. And so I think it goes back to what I said a second ago. It's established that really good working relationship, build that aura of collaboration that you're in this together, just trying to solve these problems. And I think that's where it starts. And then you just follow the data, because the utility company can't hide from the data. Usually the data uncovers issues and recoveries, things that are just exposed. And I also would say I don't think it's wise to blame them. This company, all companies, I assume, are acting in good faith to try to do things the right way. So it's never about the blame game. It's about just identifying problems and working collaboratively to find solutions to those problems.
All right, next up, this question says, how are you applying setbacks in healthcare facility patient rooms?
Yeah, that's a tough one. What I would say is I would not start there. Again, my experience in the industry, in working in healthcare as well as every other facility, is I want to say start in the places that are the easiest places to start. I would also say don't start in the operating room. It's there's just too much risk. There's too many things that can go wrong. I would say if I'm offering the first suggestion for a healthcare facility, where I would begin is I would look at your campus. I'm assuming just through your question, it's not a single hospital. Maybe it's a campus of buildings. I would start to look at the spaces on your campus that run in a more traditional way, like a 9 to 5 type of way. Maybe they're office buildings or they're support buildings. Start looking for opportunity in the spaces where it's easiest to achieve setback, make changes, begin to establish a culture, win people over, show people that it's possible, and then go back to places like patient rooms. And it's hard to answer the question without knowing more about what the possibilities are. But I think you have to think about things. Maybe my piece of advice is don't treat any one room or any one space like it can't ever be touched, or it's got to be treated the same way all year round. Most organizations have cycles where there's higher occupancy and lower occupancy, or higher use, lower use. And usually when you look at it more seasonally and you break the year into little chunks, there might be opportunities to do things different in patient rooms or in different parts of a hospital during different times of the year, because there's simply less occupancy or there's just less going on. So don't look at it as one all or nothing type of thing. Look at it as smaller pieces, and I think you'll begin to expose more opportunities.
All right, thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. This person asks, would you recommend any literature or information about finding issues with utility bills and how to find those outliers, or how to assess equipment performance to make sure vital assets are working as efficiently as possible?
I guess, Steve, I don't have an immediate thing to offer. Do you have something that you can offer? And I'm going to stall for a second, give you a chance to answer, and I'm going to think.
Yeah, I would say there's a longer answer to that one. I don't have any references right in front of me as far as some resources. So I would ask this anonymous attendee maybe to shoot you an email, Tom, and you could take some time to get back with a more thorough answer, given that we only have a minute or two left here today.
Yeah, and I agree, Steve. It's one of those things. I don't, because I've been doing this, maybe I've dismissed the references. I've kind of become my own reference, just the experience I've had. But it's a good question. Please do reach out to me. I'm happy to try to provide you something that's more specific, and just want to be part of the solution here and offer you some information.
All right, well, that is all the time we have. That is a wrap for today's webinar. Thank you both so much, Steve and Tom, for your great presentation and wonderful discussion. Thank you also to EnergyCAP for sponsoring this session. Thank you also to everyone who joined us today. We hope you found the session insightful and full of takeaways that you can bring back to your own work. Before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone that the call for abstracts is open for CX Energy 2026. So if you've got a presentation idea, you can learn more about that at cxenergy.com. Presenting at CX Energy is a unique opportunity to share your expertise and be part of one of the industry's most respected technical programs. We also want to remind attendees today of the upcoming O&M Best Practices for Energy Efficiency training, which is coming up on September 24th. And this is an online course that will walk attendees through the basics of energy management strategies, including evaluating energy bills, establishing building energy baselines and other performance metrics, developing facility benchmarks, low-cost and no-cost techniques for improving efficiency and performance, code compliance, and more. And you can learn more about that on the EMA website. Thank you again for joining us today and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you. Have a great day.